You're listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner Munson. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.
Hi, it's Louisa Tanner Munson from feelgoodastrology.com, and I'd like to welcome you to this podcast exploring the dynamics of having the North Node in the first house of your birth chart, or what would happen if the North Node was transiting through your first house in your birth chart. So a couple of different ways that we're going to look at the North Node in the first house. Now, I guess to really understand it, we need to understand what the North Node is and also the dynamics of the first house. And I'm going to do those by looking at each of those things and its opposite. So for instance, it's pointless just looking at the North Node and the meaning of the North Node without looking at what the South Node is about. And likewise, to really understand what the first house represents, we really need to look at it in terms of how that matches and fits in with the seventh house. So that's where we're heading today in this short podcast. So I hope you can stick around and listen in. So the North Node then is all about our karmic direction that we're heading towards. It shows the things that we struggle with, the things that we have to relearn again and again and again, the things that we just don't seem to be able to cope with first time, have to repeat often and frequently. So it really does show what your life's work is about in this lifetime. The South Node shows what we've already done really well and what comes easy to us and what we kind of get asked to do or called to do. If your model of the world is one of reincarnation and past lives, then the North and South Node really makes sense from the perspective that the South Node represents our previous lifetimes. It describes the kinds of lessons that we've learnt and how we've learnt them and how comfortable we are with them. And it shows where our unconscious competence in life is, those skills that just come hideously easy to us and makes no sense to anyone else. It just describes our natural ability. And conversely, the North Node shows what we struggle with and also where we're heading towards, the kind of lives that we might be going towards in other lifetimes. Obviously, if you don't have a past life, future life reincarnation type worldview, it still does fit in and work. For instance, the South Node just shows what we're really born with, and we don't have to worry too much about. It could also show a little bit of the people that we're surrounded by in our early environment, hence we pick up those skills. And the North Node shows where we're going and how we're moving away from what we know. So that's kind of how they work. Now the first and seventh house then, by comparison, the first house represents everything that we are. It represents our appearance, our first impressions, how we seem to look and talk and make an impact. It's naturally ruled by the sign of Aries, and so has a real natural link into the planet Mars. It's called the me first house, I guess, because it's just about you. It's all about me, if that makes sense. And then the seventh house represents everything that's not about you. So it represents your lovers, your friends, your enemies, basically anyone that you relate to is captured in the seventh house. And it's funny because it also shows what you project onto other people and possibly those aspects of yourself that you just can't quite believe you own. So the things that you don't believe about yourself, you just put them onto other people, you project them onto other people. So it's also a place of huge projections, which not everyone's that comfortable with, but so be it. I've often found with people's astrology, when I look at their birth charts, when I work with clients with very busy seventh houses, there's a lot going on, and they often find that until they've dealt with their projections, that they attract the same kind of person again and again and again and again. And there are always people that teach them quite hard lessons. And then once they get that and they let go of those projections and realise that they're attracting people with qualities that they're not prepared to accept in themselves. Then all of a sudden they start meeting people with the beneficial sides of those patterns in the 7th house. So it's an interesting house to look at. So if you've got the North Node in your 1st house, it means that your South Node is in your 7th house. And that would describe somebody who has had many lifetimes understanding other people or serving other people. There's a certain amount of concern about other people and understanding them, and just being very, very busy and not being very self-aware. So it shows a very sort of diplomatic and giving nature, and someone who has no problem attracting people and being surrounded by people and loved by people, etc., supported by people. Having the North Node in the 1st house is a challenge in itself. We should feel really comfortable in our 1st house, really, because it's the thing that represents us. Having the North Node there shows a certain amount of confusion about our identity, and that our identity is one of the main drivers of our life. It's getting our identity right and knowing who we are. They're really big questions for people to take on board. Until we know who we are and what we're about, it's very difficult to get your vibration right, to know what to attract into your life. So someone with a North Node in the 1st house might find they live several epochs of their life where they're focusing on a different part of a perceived need as to who they are, only to find out somewhere along the line that actually that's not really me, or I've changed. So that can be quite tricky. Something else to bear in mind is the quality of the North Node in your 1st house. So look at the planets that your North Node is connected to. Are they squares and oppositions representing challenges, or are they more sextiles and trines representing ease? Only you really can decide that, or obviously, contact an astrologer to know more. And are they related to planets that cause difficulties and transformation and deep questioning, or are they some of the softer, easier planets to relate to? There's a huge difference between having a 1st house North Node in a conjunction to Venus than there is to having a 1st house North Node in a square to Saturn or Uranus. They'll have very, very different energies, even though the North Node is still technically in the 1st house. One person will really struggle to express themselves and probably create waves while they're doing it, and the other will just naturally be who they are and be liked for it. So it's really important to study the planets involved. I guess one of the difficulties that really becomes apparent is in identifying who we are and making that our life's mission. It's very easy to alienate the people that we've already got in our life, as represented by our easy South Node. So that's another thing that kind of holds us back. If you've got a 1st house North Node, there's this constant feeling that if I invest in myself and if I take the time to consider myself, I'm going to be a selfish person. I'm not going to be able to focus on the great people in my life. So there's lots to consider. It's not an easy position by a long shot. Now, if you've actually got a North Node transiting your 1st house, then this is a taster into that kind of energy that you'll get to experience over the next 18 months or for an 18-month duration. What it means is that recently the North Node in the previous 18-month session has been about reevaluating who you are and where you're going, reevaluating your relationship to your resources and your money and your finances and your work, reevaluating your thoughts and feelings about your value in life, like what are you worth to people? And that will have brought up quite a few feelings that may or may not be very comfortable, but that will have already started to determine who you are and what your identity is. So as you move into a 1st house North Node transit, you're already thinking ahead as to, okay, well, I know how much I'm worth. And so that's going to get, and I'm worth this much to these kinds of people, and I have this kind of resourcefulness. That starts to describe who you are as an ego and how you might be best portrayed, how you might decide to come across in life. So it really gives you a bit of an insight into how you can push forward and kind of define yourself from a new perspective, and that could be quite exciting. It could involve restyling your image, not just hair and makeup, but like your actual clothes that you wear, the shoes that you wear, the places that you go to. It could determine the kind of car you drive or the type of transport that you prefer. It just describes everything, really. And I guess it's the externalization of all the learning that you've been doing over the last however many months or years you care to look back. As you look through all the houses, the North Node goes backward through the houses. So it starts at the 12th, and it's 11th, 10th, 9th, 8th, etc. And you're going through this whole journey before you get to this, okay, I've done all that now. Who the heck am I? So it's an 18-month exploration of the new you and how you've created yourself. So it is a time when people, for sure, seem to change their persona or reinvent themselves. And so from that perspective, it's quite useful. If you know it's coming up in the next few years, then it's worth preparing for it. Get all the prep work done. Think about where you'd like to be and work back from there. Use these transits to your advantage. So anyway, if you've got themes like this going on in your own chart, then just drop me a line if you would like some greater clarification, or if you'd like me to have a look directly at the planets in your chart that relate to your North Node, then just, drop me an email. You can reach me at Louisa, that's Louisa, so Louisa at feelgoodastrology.com. Take care, and thanks again for listening.
You've been listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner Munson, and this recording has been made possible by all you lovely supporters at Patreon. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.